Feeding birds is a two-way street. It helps birds survive when food is scarce, and it brings birds closer so die-hard birders and amateurs alike can observe the beauty and behavior of our fine feathered friends. Merry Christmas. We're on the road today at Audubon, Vermont. I'm Joleil Whitney. This is Across the Fence. There's no noon news today. Instead, we're bringing you an extended version of our longest running and most beloved program, Bird Notes. And we're doing it at the place to see birds year-round, Green Mountain Audubon in Huntington, Vermont. Audubon, Vermont is a state program of the National Audubon Society. The 255-acre Green Mountain Audubon Center in Huntington has been a community hub of outdoor education and conservation for 60 years, which means it's the oldest operating nature center in the state. The connection between Audubon and Across the Fence goes back to our earliest days. Fran Howe, better known as the Bird Lady, is credited as the originator of our monthly Bird Notes program. From our 60-year anniversary special, here's the Bird Lady herself talking about how she fell in love with birds at a young age.
My mother was a birder and her father was a birder, and my mother says that when I was 2.5, I used to take my grandfather's hand and say, "See meadowlark," whereupon he would take me over to the golf course, which was on part of his land, and we would look for meadowlarks. I don't remember, of course, but I can remember always being interested in the birds that I saw, identifying as many of them as I could, and remembering where I saw them. I don't remember that I found many birds' nests. My husband and I were charter members of the Green Mountain Audubon Society. I was very active in the establishment of the Nature Center in Huntington. And for several years, I did a great many interpretive walks with groups of school children. And I hope I have helped a few people to get that this is something that they can and will remember and cherish.
From the Bird Lady, we turn to Across the Fence's current long-term avian aficionado, Mark LaBarr. And Mark, as we just learned, you've been doing this since about 2000, is that right?
Yeah, somewhere around there. It's been a long time, and I've talked a lot about birds. So it's been a while right after John Merchant, who followed Fran.
All right, and usually you come into the studio and we have our conversations there, but now you're kind enough to host us here. So tell me about the Audubon Center.
So the Green Mountain Audubon Center is the oldest nature center in the state. It was started back in 1964, actually the year that I was born as well, so that's kind of a nice combination. So it's our 60th anniversary this year.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. And we have about 255 acres of land, about 5 miles of trails, a sugar bush. We do, the trail system's open to the general public. We do a lot of education, nature-based programs for youngsters and for adults. We run a banding station here. So we're always seem to be doing something here at the Green Mountain Audubon Center. The story goes that a Mrs. Hires, she was married to the family that makes the Hires root beer, was given some funding to buy a mink stole. And instead, she came to Vermont, and when this was still a farm, she decided that she would purchase this property as a summer residence.
Wow.
And eventually, over time, she decided to donate the property. She wanted it to become a nature center. And she had talked to the 4-H Club and UVM, but in the end, it was the Green Mountain Audubon Society that took that on. And that's when, through Bob Spear, that was when the Green Mountain Audubon Center really got started.
Wow. And we're actually on some of your hiking trails now. You mentioned them already a minute ago. What kind of terrain do we have?
So what's nice about the Audubon Center, and this works for folks visiting and for our education programs, is most of our trails are easy to moderate. We have some longer ones, but many of them are flat that run through our sugar woods or here in the fields up next to our office. And so they're really accessible to a lot of different people. And, you know, we have some hay fields across the road so people can wander along the edge of the Huntington River. So it's a really accessible place.
Nice, a variety of terrain and a variety of places to see some different birds from the sounds of it.
Oh yeah, so you know, we do different management. We have some open fields, beaver ponds, forests. All of those different habitats attract different birds. And so one can come out here on any given day and see a hooded merganser down in our beaver pond, which was here just about a month ago. Chickadees at our feeders, and in the summer months, wood thrushes, chestnut-sided warblers, common yellow throats, all of those, you know, summer birds that we see.
Yeah, quite a sampling of birds then.
It is. It's a great place, and it's really easy for people to access those different habitats.
We've moved to the deck here at the Audubon Center, and some people might be unpacking a new bird feeder for Christmas or something like that. So if you're just starting off, what's your advice with a new feeder?
So bird feeding is great, as you know. We do a lot of it here at the Audubon Center, here at the Green Mountain Audubon Center. And, you know, some of the simple things about bird feeding is certainly placement of your feeder. You want to try to make it, depending on how you like squirrels or not and the type of feeder, you can put it away from areas where they can jump on it. And then a big thing is what you put in the feeder. There are lots of different seeds out there. We tend to primarily feed with black oil sunflower seed. That seems to be the seed that most of the birds like, although there are mixes that have corn and millet, and some of the birds like cardinals and things like that will access those safflower seeds.
Sure. So if you have a couple feeders, do you recommend a variety?
Yeah, for sure. Certainly, we get a lot of chickadees, nuthatches, and they come to your, you know, the standard feeder. But then there are suet feeders, which we'll talk about, and then certain feeders that hold a smaller seed called Niger seed, which the siskins and the goldfinches like to eat. So having a number of different feeders will bring in more species of birds.
All right, and I know I've seen advertisements for ones that have like a camera in them or something. So do you need top tech to enjoy bird feeding?
You do not. You basically, you know, we hung these feeders up just a couple of days ago to make sure that we hung them outside of that time when the bears are still active. And within 10 minutes, the birds were back here on our feeders. And so a window and a bird feeder, that's how I look at my birds through the window. The high-tech stuff is fun, but you really don't need that to enjoy birds. And when you do have just a feeder, you can see them flitting around in the shrubs and doing their thing, whereas, you know, just the bird feeder cam just shows them eating.
Sure. And you actually mentioned, this is obviously, it's late December now, but you mentioned when a safe time to put out the bird feeders is. So when's a good benchmark?
Especially in places where you do have bear activity, you know, usually December 1st this year was when the word came out it was official to put your feeders up, and that's pretty much the time. And then, you know, start taking them down or thinking about taking them down in March. You know, as the bears come out of hibernation, you want to make sure that, you know, they can do some great damage to your feeding system, and human-bear interaction isn't great either, so.
All right, so a good thing to keep in mind for next year.
For next year, yes.
All right.
Yes.
And now we're standing in front of a couple feeders, so why don't we talk about them? This first one, I believe, is black oil sunflower seeds.
Yeah,
is that right?
It is, and this is kind of your standard tube feeder, and it has a couple of things going for it. This is probably one of the most popular feeders that we have. That the birds come to. First off, it has a large capacity, and so that reduces the amount of time you have to feed it. or fill it rather. And second off, you can see the seed, so you know the level at which the seed is at. And this particular tube feeder actually has some squirrel defense systems. So these perches, a bird can sit on them and access the seed, but anything larger than that will fall off. So, you know, standard tube feeders come just with perches, or some of the more expensive ones come with those squirrel, you know, defender kind of things. Yeah.
And how often do you have to refill something like this, or does it depend on the house?
It really depends, and it depends on the bird. So, you know, something like this feeder's only been out here a day or two, and you can see it's already gone down quite a bit. So my single feeder at my house, I have to fill up every 2 days, just because it depends on how many birds you have and what birds are there and what they're feeding on.
Sure, and just remind me, what kind of birds are really drawn to this one?
So this is a great one for black-capped chickadees. The goldfinches will use it as well. Nuthatches will come in here. Tufted titmice are another one. But because of these smaller perches, it's not that great for, say, cardinals, because they're a little bit too big. So things like a platform feeder or something that has a larger area for them to perch on makes the seed available to them.
Sure, so maybe the same seed but a different setup.
Exactly, yeah.
All right,
and we'll probably see some of those as we
great,
meander
let's do
down
it.
the
We
porch.
got another one right here. This is a suet feeder, is that right?
This is our suet feeder, and this one's a little bit different. A lot of suet feeders out there are your just standard box, and you put 1 brick in, or sometimes you can put 2 bricks in. But this one's kind of unique because suet's great. The chickadees will use it. The nuthatches will use it, but the woodpeckers will come in to use it. And what's cool about this one is this long tail that it has allows the woodpecker to basically gain support and put its tail, as it would on a tree, and so be able to feed that way.
Oh, so that's a big part of like balance for when you're feeding?
Yeah. And they'll, you know, they'll take to the smaller suet feeders. This one just is a little bit more high tech for them.
Sure. And it doesn't look maybe like something naturally occurring, quite like a sunflower seed. So what's suet made of?
Suet is basically made of fat. So naturally in the wild, if a deer or a moose or something like that died, and the birds might feed on the fat that's associated with that. So suet is just a really high energy food source. Like the black oil sunflower seed has a lot of fat content, and so gives a real boost to the birds that are using it.
Sure, and other than the woodpecker, who does this one bring in?
So, you know, you'll see chickadees, you'll see nuthatches come in. We have hairy and downy woodpeckers, which will take advantage of this. So, you know, a lot of the birds that can grip. You don't usually see, for instance, goldfinches on a suet feeder.
Sure. And I think I remember when I was younger, we made suet. Is that something you can do?
Oh yeah, certainly. You can take, you know, fat that you buy at the store, and you can render it out. You can add seeds, chill it down. I would say to maybe do it outside, as the odor can be rather strong sometimes of rendering fat. So yes, but you can, oftentimes I'll go to the supermarket and you'll see a big hunk of beef suet or something like that that can be rendered down. You can see our chickadees are scolding us a little bit here because we're
occupying this one too much.
Yeah. So they're letting us know that they want to eat.
All right, then let's move on to the next one. And this is a good opportunity. You were saying that no bird feeder is truly squirrel-proof, but this one gives it the college try.
Yeah, it does give it the college try. So this is, you know, kind of a modified hopper feeder, we call it. You know, you lift up the lid and the seed goes down in. And but this one, if you can set different weights on it, but if a squirrel tries to climb on it and access the seed, that little gate closes. But other species can stand on it, including cardinals and things like that, and they won't trigger that. Now, you said college try, that's right, because I've seen gray squirrels come up and down, and they'll hang right off the front and reach in and grab individual seeds and avoid triggering this. So squirrels are just
sees how hard they're going to try.
They're sharp when it comes to getting at birdseed.
All right, and how much would a bird feeder like this run you? What's the price range?
You're looking probably $50, $60. Some of the higher end bird feeders can get really expensive. A simple 2-feeder that is just a straight plastic tube with perches on it can be relatively cheap. And of course, a feeder like this, without the fancy squirrel stuff, folks can build them at home as well. So the advantage to a feeder like this made out of metal and out of plastic, you do want to keep your feeders clean. And so we recommend at the start of every season, and what we do is we clean them with a one part bleach to 4 parts water. And we'll try to do that over the course of the winter as well. And the metal and the plastic feeders are a little bit easier to clean than, say, a wooden feeder.
And is there a benchmark for how often you should clean it, or just a couple times?
Every couple, 2-3 weeks, something like that. In between, the seed's out, you have a chance to give it a quick clean. It just makes it safer for all the birds that are visiting, because feeder stations, because birds congregate there, can spread disease. So you have to be aware of that.
And how long would something like this last, the bird feeder?
How long will this feeder last over time? Quite a long time.
Sure,
Although
nice.
we have another one out back, and again, the squirrels have managed to do enough damage to it that we had to get ourselves a new one. So sometimes, and some of our feeders along here have spots where the squirrels got in. So it really depends on your squirrel population.
Also, I mean, if you keep it out of the hands of bears as well.
And bears, yes.
Yeah.
Well, bears will do a good number on.
Yeah.
I would imagine they would open this up kind of like a can to get at the
Not
seed.
holding them back.
Nothing holding them back. Yeah.
And this isn't really a bird feeder, but around here you have a ton of plants that kind of naturally feed the birds. Tell me
Right,
about those.
and that's really important. Folks bird feed, it supplements their food. These birds have, evolved to get food on their own, so it's not a necessity. But we have a bunch of plants out here, dogwoods, viburnums, things that naturally produce berries that are available for the birds. The one nice thing about a bird feeder, it allows humans to make a connection to those birds.
Sure.
So we do a lot of plantings out here and a lot of management to support bird populations. But having a bird feeder and just being able to sit there and watch the birds come back and forth, again, just connects people to birds, and oftentimes can be the start to becoming a birder or a bird watcher.
And there's no concern that feeding the birds almost makes them codependent so they can't survive on their own?
No, we get questions like that, where I'm going away for vacation in January, I'm going to take the feeder down, I'm afraid my birds. They do all right by themselves.
They've been at it for a while.
They've been at it for a while, and so, if you're concerned, you can slowly back them off if you know you're going, and maybe let the feeder run dry for a day or two, then fill it and give them some heads up that the food source won't be, cut off drastically.
Sure, wean them off of it a little bit.
wean it off.
All right, we've got another one to go look at.
Yeah.
This is a different kind of seed, is that right?
That's correct. So, like I said, there's a bunch of different seeds that are out there. This is a feeder that's designed to hold what's called Niger seed or thistle seed. You can see that the holes are really small because the seed is really small. And this is a feeder that, things like goldfinches and pine siskins really like. They can get their little bills into those holes and pull that seed out. You won't see too many other species. Chickadees won't necessarily feed on this, or nuthatches. But if you want to expand the number or the number of species that you see, having a thistle feeder is good to do. The one thing that you do want to keep in mind with thistle is it is the one seed that can go bad. So saving it over the winter, it might be better to start fresh each year with thistle. A little expensive, but worth having some fresh stuff to start the season.
Is there a way to tell when it goes bad? Does it have like a smell?
Not really, other than the fact that you just don't see birds using it.
Sure. Okay.
And
they know.
They're aware of it. So an old seed might work. You might be able to mix it in, but we found getting a new bag of thistle seed is worth the effort. The other seeds, if you have leftover and can keep rodents out, the sunflower seeds you can use the next year if you have leftovers.
All right, and how about anything maybe that we don't see out here, some crazy alternative that you might find in your kitchen that a bird would like?
So there's a host of different ways that you can make bird feeders out of 2-liter Pepsi jars. We sometimes will take pine cones and stuff seed into the pine cones with some kind of suet or sometimes peanut butter. There are feeders out there that accept
plugs that are pre-made peanut butter plugs for species that like suet. Platform feeders are another way, just a simple platform that the seed can be put on. When I go out and put seed at my house, I usually fill the feeder and put some on the table underneath. Just be aware that that's going to allow squirrels to access them.
So, do you ever feed the squirrels intentionally?
Yeah, you can. A lot of people will do that. They'll use corn, and there are specific feeders just for squirrels, little like picnic tables that the squirrels sit on and they eat, and that feed is a lot less expensive. And so what happens is you keep the squirrels occupied with less expensive food, and I'll allow the birds to take advantage of the more expensive seed.
All right, we've talked about birds a lot, and we're going to talk about them again in a second, but you also have a sugar house here at the Audubon Center people might not think of. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so, we're at the beginning of winter, and it won't be too long, 3-4 more months. We have a small sugaring operation here, maybe 500, 600 taps. We still do buckets the old-fashioned way. And we manage our sugar woods for birds. So one of the programs that we have here at Audubon, Vermont is focused on forest sugar bush management, that birds, it creates structure within the forest. And so managing your forest that way is better than kind of creating a monoculture of just sugar maple trees that you use for sugaring. So we'll highlight, we have our Sugar on Snow parties as a fundraiser in the spring, when sugaring's happening. But that's a little bit a ways yet. We have to get through the winter first.
Okay, and speaking of that, you actually have a sooner event coming up, which is it used to be your Christmas bird count, and now you're saying it's the winter bird count.
Well, it still is the Christmas bird count, but some folks, there are these count circles, basically 15 miles in diameter, where people will focus on birding. And some of those circles have renamed their circles to be more inclusive, and they call them winter bird counts. But the Christmas bird count was started 125 years ago this year, when folks used to go out and they used to shoot birds on Christmas. And a guy by the name of Frank Chapman said, why don't we just count them? And so this data is collected across the U.S. and into Canada, throughout North America for the most part during the winter months, to get an idea of populations of birds.
Sure.
And scientists can use that data along with other data to, identify trends, see about, influxes of some feeder species that come down. Hairy redpolls are one of them that are eruptive. Some years you see them, some years you don't. So the count allows us to track those movements.
Great, and no matter the name, all the numbers are going to the same place?
Exactly, yeah. They're all coordinated by Audubon, and those numbers are then computerized and,
Sure.
all that.
And how does that kind of contribute to your work here at the Audubon Center?
We use the Christmas winter bird count as a means of, again, engaging people in whether it be bird feeding, whether it be going out and looking at birds. I personally haven't used much of the Christmas bird count data. I use most of my, the data we collect is during the summer at the banding. And to be honest with you, I like going down to Belize, as I think I've mentioned in other shows, during the winter time. So I do some of my counting down there.
Yeah, a snowbird.
Yes, I am, yes.
And this is a bit of a preview, but you also do a bird count in the summer, is that right? For the spring?
There's the great backyard bird count. So not quite the spring. It's usually in February. A little bit different than the Christmas bird count, little different protocols as to how it's done. But again, all of that information, is pooled, and you can, it gives really critical data to folks that are studying these things, and gives people something to do, get out and see the birds, and again, makes that connection between us humans and the birds that are around us.
Absolutely, a nice way to give back with your passion.
That's right.
All right. Thank you so much for hosting us today.
You're more than welcome. I'm always coming up to the studio. And
great to have it the other way around.
It's exactly. So
right.
Always happy to have you down here.
And Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you too.
We've got a few minutes left to our Christmas program. In a moment, we'll look back at the show that was one of the first programs to air on WCAX. Appropriately for today, it was simply called The Santa Claus Show. First, I want to thank Mark LaBarr for hosting us out at the Green Mountain Audubon Center. We hope you've enjoyed this extended visit across the fence because next week at this time we're running it back. On New Year's Day, we've got another half-hour program. That's when we'll talk with the founder of the Facebook page Burlington Area History, Bob Blanchard. He dug through his archives and came up with dozens of images from the early days of WCAX. We talk about the founding of the TV station, early locally produced shows like Dance Date, The Mixing Bowl, and programming oddities like Shopping with Nancy. One of the more popular programs from CAX's early days featured a certain jolly old elf. Here's a preview of my conversation with Bob Blanchard as he talks about the Santa Claus Show.
This was one of the first live shows on Channel 3. It was the third one that was created, and it started in December of '54. And the show was hosted by Stuart Hall, and the way it would open would be, it was 15 minutes, and the premise was kids would write letters to Santa, and Santa would read them on the air. So Stuart Hall would be the first face you saw, and then he would intro the show, and then he would say something like, calling the North Pole, and there would be kind of the blurry image, and then it would get clearer and clearer, and then you'd see that right
Wow.
there. Santa Claus with the Santa's workshop over his shoulder. And for a long time, I didn't know who did Santa Claus. I thought it was maybe Ken Green.
Santa himself, of course.
Yeah, you're right, well, exactly. But it turned out it was a guy named Bill Dow, who was an on-air personality for WCAX radio. And I don't think he ever appeared on the air, with one exception, on Channel 3 TV. So.
Wow.
Yeah, but anyway, that was a really popular show, and I wrote in, but my letter never got read. So
people would write in and then Santa.
Yeah. We wanted to get the toys, So.
Shame you never got yours.
Oh well.
Please join us on New Year's Day at noon for our full conversation with Bob Blanchard about the early days of WCAX television. That takes care of our program for today. My thanks to the crew behind the scenes here at WCAX and our roadshow crew, Ben, Keith, and Caleb. I'm Joleil Whitney. This is Across the Fence. Merry Christmas and have a good one.